Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the cryptoverse. Today we're going to talk about Bitcoin and the fact that the bull market support band, which is the 20-week SMA and the 21-week EMA, has now pushed higher to range between 19,560 to 22,159. So if you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up. Also check out the Telegram channel, which you can find a link to in the description below. Let's go ahead and jump in. So if you're new to this space, which I imagine a lot of people are, one of the things we talk about is our theoretical bull market support band. And you might say, well, why do we use this? Well, if we go back and look again at the last market cycle, we've covered this a lot, but there are a lot of new people. If we go back and look at the last market cycle, we can see that we had several corrections down to the support band. Some of them were 20% corrections, some of them were 28% or 30% or even close to 40%. So we've had several of these corrections in the past, and we would assume that at some point we will revisit it this market cycle. Now, one of the things about this support band is that it's not constant. So we have to remember that it's changing, okay? It was only a couple months ago when the support band was closer to $12,000 or so. Now the support band ranges again from around 19.6K up to 22.2K or so, okay? Plus or minus a few dollars, depends on the exchange you use. Now, with that in mind, we always have to be prepared for this support band in the event of a correction. And of course, we're not saying that Bitcoin will correct tomorrow, but if it were to go into a prolonged correction, then this would be the band we would want to hold as support to maintain the integrity of the bull market. Now, there is no guarantee we would hold it as support. There have been plenty of times in the past where we have not. One of the things we've talked about is how it seems like this market cycle appears to be closely related to the one from 2 cycles ago. And if we go back and look at the BLX, we can see, and if we overlay the bull market support, there was in fact a time during the last cycle where we broke through it, okay, or 2 cycles ago. Last cycle, we more or less held it as support all the way up. But 2 cycles ago, you can see that we had a peak and we came down and we actually had moves well below the support band. Okay, so it's not like it has to necessarily hold. The higher, I would say the further extended Bitcoin gets from it when it has a correction, it's going to be harder to hold. For instance, from this wick up here, Bitcoin had to correct about 66% over a couple months to get to the support band, and it didn't ultimately hold. However, note that in this cycle, all the corrections that held were 20 to 40% drops, and it was a 50% drop that ultimately could not hold and ushered in the bear market. So, looking at it now, what we can do is we can first look at where we currently are, or let's go to the peak and measure down. So it's a 55% drop. However, remember, this is going to keep increasing, and give it another week, and the 20-week SMA will be over 20K. It could be close to 21K or so. By the time, even if we were to go into a correction, by the time we reach it, it might not be at the current valuations, right? They could be a lot higher. So this is just something we always want to keep in the back of our mind. Of course, a lot of us are macro bullish on Bitcoin. Of course, a lot of us think it's going to go to 100K, but the journey will probably be a long one, and it's not going to just go up monotonically. However, as I've joked before, that Bitcoin will not go up monotonically, Bitcoin's response to that was essentially hold my beer, because since October, it's mostly gone up monotonically, at least on weekly timeframes. If you look at, say, 12-day timeframes, it's just green, okay? It's just green so far. So with that in mind, we want to obviously be aware of the fact that Bitcoin could push higher, and it will simply ultimately delay an inevitable test of the bull market support band, and maybe by the time we test it, it could be much higher than it currently is today. But as long as we keep weekly videos discussing where this is, then you guys will always know in the event of a correction, whenever a correction happens, and a sustained correction, that is what we want to hold as support to maintain the integrity of the bull market. And if we start closing weekly candles below it, then altcoins tend to perform very poorly during times like that. So that's just something to be aware of. Now, one of the things we've also discussed is if we look at the weekly chart, let's zoom in. The volatility on Bitcoin over the last week or so has been reducing down, and it has been that diminishing volatility that has enabled a lot of the other coins we follow on the channel to make their own fairly significant moves, not only against USD, but also against Bitcoin. This includes Ethereum, Chainlink, ADA, and DOT. Those are the main four we cover besides Bitcoin on the channel, and they've all been doing very well, not only against USD, but also against Bitcoin. And we can see that Bitcoin, I mean, I don't really draw a lot of lines on the channel that I put much value in, and I certainly don't put much value in these, but we can see that it is somewhat decreasing down here. And we'll see ultimately what happens. You know, if this is going to be one of those things that plays out over several weeks, then that would actually likely be very good for altcoins, because altcoins, they keep getting somewhat spooked, but they're still remaining fairly strong. And so if Bitcoin keeps testing, you know, these areas down here, maybe the altcoins will have these short-term corrections. But as long as Bitcoin keeps pushing back up and doing this for a few weeks, then a lot of altcoins could still theoretically do quite well. What I think you should be on the lookout for is, are we having a sustained move down on the daily time frame? And clearly on the daily time frame, we've basically not really been going below $34,000. We've had wicks below $34,000, but you can see there's 3 days now where we had the bottom of the candle at 34K. So I would say, as long as Bitcoin is doing something like this in this region, there's a good chance that the dominance of Bitcoin in the short term would actually likely fall. Of course, none of this is financial advice. It could also be wrong, right? Maybe it's just my view of the market. But this is what I interpret it to mean. That this sideways movement with reducing, we've always discussed this. For altcoins to start moving in a bull market, Bitcoin needs to be well above the 20-week moving average, historically speaking, and it tends to need to be going sideways, where volatility is reduced down. Of course, if Bitcoin is going up quickly, it can drag the rest of the market up with it, but if you want to see these coins gain against Bitcoin, it needs to go sideways well above the 20-week moving average. And that's, you know, we've talked about that for months, and you guys are seeing it play out quite well right now. So you know why we talk about this in the future. You'll know why. This is an example of diminishing Bitcoin volatility in the short term and subsequent moves of other coins as they're gaining confidence that Bitcoin isn't going to imminently dump. Okay. Now, if Bitcoin gives us the idea that it would dump, and it starts, you know, putting in daily candles down here and starts trending lower, then obviously a lot of these altcoins would correct back a bit. So this is just something to consider, right? We always want to consider all perspectives, not just the bullish perspective. Of course, the bullish perspective, as we've shown, are our regression bands, and let's go look at those. So these are the regression bands for Bitcoin. And ultimately speaking, I hope for us to make it to the peak of the regression band up here. Now remember, one thing to consider is I'm much more confident in the lower regression band that I use for accumulation than the upper one. The lower band has been fit to over 1,000 data points, whereas the upper band is fit to 3. So consider that, you know, it's always possible we don't quite make it to the band, and then we'll have a fourth data point that doesn't make it there. It's also possible we go slightly above it, and then we're just adding a fourth data point to this future fit. However, be that as it may, you know, I don't, even if this were the local top, if 42K, it is kind of the answer to everything, right? Even if 42K were the local top for a while, I would not personally consider this the peak of the market cycle. Okay, I would not consider it the peak of the market cycle. You can see that we had an extension above the regression band back in 2019 that went to 14K. Now we have an extension all the way up to 42K. To get to the peak regression band, we would be looking at somewhere between 55K up to around 82K. So there still would be a ways to go to get to this peak regression band, to where things would be getting very, very heated at that point. I mean, as if they already aren't. Of course, they already are heated, considering we haven't had a sustained correction in several months. But you see that the distance that Bitcoin would have to go from the current price, it would need to go up almost 60% or so. So we need to go up almost 60% to reach, you know, that upper regression band. So keep in mind, we always, you know, on this channel, we like to stay pragmatic about things. We don't want to go, you know, FOMOing in or anything like that. What I would say in this scenario is that it's good to be cautious, and you know, we see where Bitcoin is. We see how far it's come. We know that it can easily push higher any week it wants to, and which will leave people saying who bought the dip. But in the same manner, it could be coming. It could be coming down, right? And that's just something we always want to consider. Another perspective, right, is if you look at, say, daily time frames. And let's remove this. You know, I mean, in terms of, say, a textbook bubble, we're certainly not saying that this is a full-fledged bubble that will lead to a 2-year bear market or anything like that. But in terms of looking at, say, textbook bubbles, you have a pretty nice one right here. You could call this a sell-off, maybe a run-up, media attention, new paradigm, back down to the dead cat bounce. Oh, we're returning to normal. Just kidding. And so far back down. And if this were to continue to play out like a textbook bubble, then it would have us going down into this region over here. However, bubbles are they're easy to identify in hindsight, but again, it's always hard to know when you're in one exactly how high it can go. For instance, let me show you what I mean. I mean, you know, in the same manner that it could come down, it's still theoretically possible that we could just trend much higher and then come down for a while. Okay, so it's always hard to know when you're in one. That's why on the channel we often talk about risk-adjusted returns. We cannot time the top, we cannot time the bottom, but if you systematically move into the market when the risk is low and systematically move out of the market when the risk is high, then it can at least offset your risk. Of course, it does not claim to be the strategy that will necessarily yield you the most profit, because the strategy that will yield you the most profit is whatever strategy is able to predict the top with the most accuracy. We have a risk metric that we use to help us identify how heated we are, but with even with that, it's hard to know exactly the day and time that it will peak. In the same manner, it's hard to know the day in which it will reach its bottom, and so a lot of people have no problem moving into the market and putting money in when the risk is low, but it's obviously much harder when the risk is high. So what we want to do here is say, you know what? I personally think that this cycle will take a long time. I think that this is the cycle. Obviously, this is a cycle of institutional money, and I think it's going to flood into the market over several years. I don't think it's going to just be this thing where institutions flood into the market in 2021 and then everyone lose interest in 2022. I think this is going to be a multi-year cycle, and it's going to be a very bumpy cycle. There's going to be corrections. There's going to be short-term bubbles, micro bubbles, just like we had last cycle. This one has dwarfed most of those from the last cycle. But zooming out on a theoretical cycle, if we were to overlay our regression bands and flip this back to a log scale, while the peak of the cycle might show 55K to 83K or 82K now, we know that it's possible over the next several years, this is going to continue to monotonically range up. And so as it does, if even if we were to have a correction and ultimately trend up higher later on, this would ultimately lead higher. So the idea is the longer it takes us to build up, the more momentum we'll have and the higher we should ultimately be able to fly. So I do think that during this cycle, which I do believe will last several years, I think that Bitcoin should be able to get over 100K. But it could be a long journey to get there. So I would say buckle up and enjoy the ride. I sincerely doubt we're going to get to 100K next month or anything like that. But of course, be ready for anything. So if you guys like the content, remember to subscribe to the channel. We have the premium list at intothecryptoverse.com. If you're looking for exclusive content, make sure you guys check it out. We have a sale for the lifetime membership right now. You can purchase that for the next couple weeks. The price for the lifetime membership will be going up on February 1st. So if you don't want that, we also have a monthly membership. You can find that at intothecryptoverse.com. The lifetime deal is also in the description below. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you like the content, you like the approach to the market. Give the video a thumbs up. Also, we have a Telegram channel if you're looking for a community to join and talk crypto during these pretty impressive times in the crypto space. So make sure you guys check that out. And good luck in the market. The markets are certainly alive right now. And yeah, everyone good luck right now as we navigate this. Certainly a lot of the coins we're following on the channel, Bitcoin, Ethereum, Link, ADA, and DOT, have had pretty good runs over the last few months. So make sure you guys subscribe to continue following these coins as we watch them navigate the cycle, and I'll see you next time.